The fluorescent lights of the small neighborhood pharmacy buzzed softly as a young woman named Alina stepped up to the counter, clutching a crumpled prescription in her hand. She looked exhausted, not the kind of tired sleep could fix, but the tired that comes from weeks of worry, stress, and hoping things will somehow work out. The pharmacist, a gentle-looking man in his 40s, typed quickly on the computer. As he read the screen, his expression subtly shifted, not enough for most people to notice. But Alina saw it immediately. Her stomach tightened. He cleared his throat quietly. People in the line behind her shifted, waiting, watching. I'm really sorry, she whispered, her voice cracking. Can I just give me a second? She stepped aside, but her legs felt weak, barely carrying her to a small plastic chair by the wall. She sat down, pressing her palm against her forehead as her vision blurred. She tried her cards anyway, one after another. Each declined with a loud beep that echoed like judgment. Finally, she lowered her face into her hands. A single tear slipped down her cheek, then another, until she couldn't hold them back anymore. She cried quietly, trying not to make a scene, but pain has a way of breaking through even the strongest walls. Across the pharmacy, a few people glanced at her with sympathy. Some avoided looking at all, uncomfortable with her vulnerability. But one person standing just a few feet behind her in line didn't look away. A man in a black hoodie, sunglasses, hands in his pockets. He watched the entire thing, silently, thoughtfully, and she had no idea that the man standing behind her was Ozzy Osbourne, or that her life was about to change in the most unexpected way. She stepped away from the counter slowly, like her entire world had just collapsed in the middle of a brightly lit pharmacy. The fluorescent lights above her buzzed softly, but inside her chest, everything felt loud. Her heartbeat, her panic, her fear. She sank into one of the plastic chairs near the waiting area, the kind that always felt too cold and too hard. She tried to blink away the tears forming in her eyes, but they spilled over before she could stop them. She covered her face with both hands, not because she was ashamed of crying. She checked her phone, hoping maybe, just maybe, she had forgotten about a deposit. But her bank app only made things worse. Bills, overdraft warnings, a paycheck still a week away. Her throat tightened. She tried to breathe through it, but the harder she fought the tears, the faster they came. She wiped her cheeks with the sleeve of her jacket and whispered to herself, "It's fine. I'll figure it out. I always do." But even she didn't believe her words. The pharmacist approached her gently. "Ma'am, I know this is difficult," he said softly, "but you can try contacting your provider again, maybe request an emergency discount." She shook her head without looking up. "I already tried. They don't care. I can't afford $847. I can barely afford groceries." She pressed her palms against her eyes, embarrassed that she was crying in front of strangers, embarrassed that life had pushed her this far. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that someone just a few feet behind her was watching every second of her struggle. A man in a baggy hoodie, head down, hands in his pockets. She looked up, eyes red, cheeks wet, completely shocked that a stranger was speaking to her. She had no idea who he was, no idea what he was about to do, and absolutely no idea that the man talking to her was someone the whole world knew. Someone whose music had changed generations. Someone who was about to change her life in a way she would never forget. She tried to steady her breathing, but the tears kept coming. People passed by, pretending not to stare, but everyone heard the pharmacist say at $847. Everyone saw the way her hope collapsed right there at the counter. He was watching her, not in a creepy way, but with a kind of quiet concern, like he felt every bit of her pain. She had no idea that the stranger behind her had lived through decades of fame, chaos, pain, and struggle, and could recognize real suffering the moment he saw it. She sniffled again, trying to pull herself together, whispering, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." As she stepped away from the counter to let the next person go ahead, the next person was the man in the hoodie, but he didn't step forward. Not yet. "One word, love," said in a warm British accent, nearly undid her again. She shook her head quickly. It's my medication. I really need it. But," she swallowed hard, "I can't afford it anymore, and it keeps going up. Every month, it gets worse. I don't know what to do." He nodded slowly, listening with full attention, not interrupting, not judging. "I get it," he said after a moment. "Life hits hard sometimes." She gave a shaky laugh. "Yeah, harder than I expected today." The stranger paused, glancing at the pharmacist who was restocking bottles behind the counter. His expression changed, not anger, not disappointment, something heavier, something like, "No one should be suffering like this. You shouldn't be going through this alone," he said. "I don't want to bother anyone," she repeated, shaking her head. "I shouldn't be crying in public. I'm sorry. You've got nothing to apologize for," he said firmly. His tone wasn't stern, it was protective. People nearby were starting to notice. Someone whispered, "Who's he?" Another said, "He looks familiar." Phones subtly tilted, pretending not to record but absolutely recording. The girl fiddled with the strap of her bag nervously. "It's fine. Really? I'll figure something out." The man tilted his head, studying her face. Love, you shouldn't have to figure out how to stay healthy. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. No stranger had ever spoken to her with that much sincerity. Then he stood up. She blinked. Where are you? He didn't answer. He simply walked toward the pharmacy counter with slow, purposeful steps. The pharmacist looked up, sir, ready to check out. The man nodded, but what he said next made the entire store go silent. The line at the pharmacy had gone nearly silent. People pretended to browse gum, vitamins, and discount cough syrup, but everyone's ears were focused on the young woman still wiping tears from her cheeks. The cashier tried not to look at her, but even he couldn't hide the worry on his face. It wasn't easy to watch someone break down because of a price tag. The man in the dark hoodie, still unnoticed, still quiet, stood a few steps behind her. He hadn't moved with the line. He hadn't even looked impatient. He was just watching, calmly, softly, like he had already made a decision. The woman sniffled and tried to regain composure, but her hands were trembling as she fumbled with her wallet for the 100th time. I'm sorry, she whispered to the cashier again, even though she had nothing to apologize for. Maybe I can come back next week. I'll figure something out. She turned to grab her small purse and walk away, but before she could take 2 steps, the hooded man moved, not rushed, not dramatic, just a steady walk toward the counter. Miss, he said gently, his voice deep but warm. Hold on a moment. She looked up, embarrassed. I'm sorry. I don't want to hold anyone up. Please go ahead. But he didn't step past her. Instead, he stepped beside her, facing the cashier. The pharmacist blinked, confused. Ah, sir. Next in line, the hooded man took a slow breath. And then, in a calm voice that carried through the entire store, he said, add her medication to my bill. Silence. Utter, absolute silence. The cashier froze mid-keystroke. The woman stood motionless, eyes widening. Someone near the candy shelf actually gasped aloud. I am sorry, the cashier stammered, thinking he had misheard. The man repeated, this time with even more clarity. I said, put her medication on my bill. He reached into his back pocket, pulling out a black card, one of those cards that only the extremely wealthy carry. He placed it gently on the counter. It didn't just land. It declared something: power, kindness, intent. The woman shook her head immediately, overwhelmed. No, sir, please. You don't have to do that. I can't accept. But he raised his hand with a soft gesture, not demanding silence, but offering reassurance. Let me help, he said. It's okay. Her voice wavered. But it's $847. That's too much. I don't even know you, and you don't need to, he replied. You just need your medicine. A few people in the line exchanged looks. Another whispered, this is unreal, while an older man nodded slowly, touched by the stranger's kindness. The cashier looked between them, almost afraid to process the payment. Sir, are you sure? The hooded man gave a tiny smile from beneath the shadow of his cap. I wouldn't ask if I wasn't. The woman's eyes filled again, this time not with despair, but disbelief, relief, gratitude, so powerful it almost looked painful. Her voice cracked. Why would you do that for me? The man kept his eyes on the cashier as he spoke, but his words were meant for her. No one should have to choose between their health and their wallet. Not today. Not ever. A hush spread through the pharmacy. A mother in line pressed a hand to her chest. The cashier swallowed hard as he rang up the medication and placed the bag gently on the counter, almost reverently. As the machine processed the payment, the woman stepped closer to the man, still shaking. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know how to repay you. You don't have to repay anything, he said softly. Just take care of yourself. And then it happened. The cashier tilted his head. A teenager squinted from the back of the line. A man near the cold medicine section froze mid-reach. Someone whispered, hold on. That voice? Another whispered, is that a third person, mouthed silently? No way. That sounds like Ozzy Osbourne. The store seemed to inhale deeply all at once. The woman blinked, confused, then slowly looked up at the man's hood. People around them leaned in, ready for the reveal of a lifetime. The woman stared at the stranger as he placed his hand gently on the counter. The entire store seemed to hold its breath. The pharmacist blinked twice, unsure whether she heard correctly. You want to pay for her medication? The pharmacist asked softly. The man nodded. Yes, put it on my bill. The crowd behind him reacted in a wave. Soft gasps, muffled whispers, confused murmurs. But the woman just stood frozen, eyes wide and overflowing. Sir, please, I can't accept that, she whispered, her voice trembling as she wiped her cheeks. You don't even know me. The man tilted his head slightly, as if studying her pain, and spoke in a gentle tone that didn't match the powerful presence he carried. Sometimes you don't need to know someone to help them. She covered her mouth to stop a sob from escaping. But it's $847. She protested, her voice almost breaking. It's too much. I can't let you. He raised a hand, stopping her gently. Let me. The firmness in his voice wasn't forceful, just compassionate, calm, and unshakable. Behind them, someone in line squinted at the man, whispering to his girlfriend. Hey, he looks familiar. His girlfriend leaned sideways, trying to catch a glimpse beneath the hood pulled low over his forehead. No way, it can't be, she whispered back. Another man, farther behind, stared harder. That voice? I've heard that voice somewhere. The woman at the counter sniffled, shaking her head in disbelief. Why would you do this for me? The stranger let out a soft breath. No one should cry over medicine, he said. If you need it, you deserve to have it. Simple as that. The words struck her deeper than she expected. She felt another tear slip down her cheek, but this one wasn't from fear or shame. It was from the shock of unexpected kindness. Still, she shook her head again. I don't want to. I don't want to burden you, he chuckled, a low, unmistakably gravelly sound that made 3 people in line snap their heads upward. Honey, said an elderly woman behind him, covering her mouth with shaking fingers. I know that laugh. The stranger finally turned slightly, giving the crowd a clearer view. His face was still shadowed, but his jawline, his expression, his posture, something about him screamed familiarity. The pharmacist, too, stared intently, her eyes narrowing. Sir, forgive me, but are you? The man let out a small sigh, not annoyed, but amused, and reached up to grab the edge of his hoodie. Slowly, he pulled it back. Gasps exploded around the room. One woman dropped her purse. A man took a step back, mouth hanging open. Another person whispered loudly, no freaking way. The young woman at the counter froze completely, because standing in front of her, the man paying for her medication was none other than Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness himself. The rock legend, the global icon, the man who filled stadiums for decades, now standing in a quiet pharmacy, paying for a stranger's $847 prescription. The woman's knees almost buckled. Oh, Ozzy, she stuttered. Are you really? Ozzy smiled, not his wild onstage grin, but a warm, gentle, almost fatherly smile. It's me, he said softly, and it's all right. Love, let me help. Her hands flew to her face as she cried harder, overwhelmed by the moment. Ozzy stepped closer and spoke with sincere empathy. You're going through enough already. Let this be one less thing to worry about. News outlets began calling it the $847 miracle. Fans flooded Ozzy's social media with love and gratitude. Healthcare activists used the moment to highlight real issues people face every day. But the most heartwarming part, the woman now home, safe, and with the medication she desperately needed, wrote a simple message. I'll never forget today. I was broken, crying, and hopeless. Then a stranger, a legend, stepped behind me. Thank you, Ozzy. You saved more than my health. You saved my hope. The story reached millions before the woman even made it home. By the next morning, her phone was overflowing with messages. Friends, co-workers, even people she hadn't spoken to in years were sending her links. Is this you? This is going viral everywhere. Ozzy Osbourne helped you. She stared at the videos and posts in disbelief. Someone who had been standing in line behind them had typed out a simple post. A young woman cried over her $847 medication today, and Ozzy Osbourne quietly paid for it. That one sentence was enough to set the internet on fire. People shared the story across every platform: Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. In just hours, hashtags like #Ozzy helping, #kindness still exists, #847 stories started trending worldwide. Thousands of comments appeared. What a legend. Fame fades, but kindness doesn't. Healthcare shouldn't break people. He didn't mention the woman by name. He didn't brag. He didn't center himself. He simply turned a private moment into a reminder the world desperately needed, and people listened. Across the internet, fans shared clips of Ozzy's concerts, interviews, and moments of generosity from throughout his career. Many said this was the most Ozzy thing he'd ever done. Not the rock legend, not the icon, but the human being. As for the woman, something inside her changed. If you believe kindness still exists in this world, type heart in the comments, and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this.